Congratulations to Tyler, I said, forcing the words through a smile that felt like broken glass. My name's Anthony. I'm 44, and I had just watched 5 years of my life get handed to a 23-year-old who'd been at Ravens Park Ventures for exactly 3 months. Tyler grinned like he'd earned something, and the conference room smelled of stale coffee and disappointment. Everyone clapped. I clapped too. My manager, Gerald Patterson, stood at the head of the table with his chest puffed out like a rooster. Tyler's going to do great things as our new regional operations director, he said. The same position I'd been training for since 2019. The same position I'd been promised when old Henderson retired. I kept my hands folded, kept my face neutral, but something cold settled in my chest where hope used to live. Tyler was Gerald's nephew. Everyone knew it. Nobody said a word. The kid had a fresh business degree and a confidence that came from never having to earn anything. He'd spent 3 months watching me handle vendor contracts, manage supply chain logistics, and troubleshoot equipment failures across 4 states. Now he was my boss. Anthony's been invaluable in getting Tyler up to speed, Gerald added. Like 5 years of perfect performance reviews and 60-hour weeks were just elaborate job training for someone else's future. I nodded. Happy to help, I said. The meeting ended. People filed out, offering Tyler handshakes and congratulations. I gathered my notepad and pen, moving slower than usual, my mind sharp and clear, like waking up in the middle of the night and suddenly understanding something that had been bothering me for months. Gerald caught my arm as I reached the door. Anthony, stick around a minute. We stood alone in the conference room. He loosened his tie and tried to look sympathetic. I know this might come as a surprise, he said, but Tyler brings fresh perspectives. New energy. Sure, I said. You understand, right? It's nothing personal. I looked at him long enough to notice his thinning hair, soft middle, comb-over hiding the bald spots. He had inherited his position when his father-in-law retired. The irony wasn't lost on me. I understand perfectly, I said. He relaxed. Good. I knew you'd be professional about this. That's why you're such a valuable team member. Valuable. Not valuable enough for the promotion I'd earned, but valuable enough to train his nephew and smile about it. I walked back to my desk and sat down. The office buzzed with phones ringing, keyboards clicking, people solving problems. I opened my laptop and stared at the screen a full minute before typing. I'd started at Ravens Park Ventures in March 2019, right after my divorce finalized, needing a fresh start. Manufacturing logistics felt solid, something I could build on. The company handled industrial equipment distribution across the Southwest. Boring work that paid well and let me sleep at night. Gerald had hired me himself, shook my hand, saying they needed someone with my experience. I'd spent 12 years at my previous company before budget cuts eliminated my position. At 44, starting over wasn't easy, but Gerald made it sound like opportunity. We're growing fast, he'd said during my interview. Lots of room for advancement for the right people. I became the right people. I worked weekends when shipments got delayed, stayed late when customers had emergencies, built relationships with suppliers from Phoenix to Houston. My performance reviews were spotless. Gerald always smiled, always promised bigger things. Your management material, Anthony, he'd say. Just be patient. Patient. I was good at patient. My daughter Sophia visited every other weekend. She was 16 now, old enough to notice when I looked tired. Sometimes she'd find me at the kitchen table Sunday mornings, laptop open, responding to work emails. Dad, it's the weekend, she'd say. Just catching up, I'd tell her. Building something. Good here. She'd roll her eyes, but she understood. Her mom had remarried a lawyer with reasonable hours, coached Little League. I was the dad who worked too much but sent birthday money on time and never missed a school play. The first crack appeared 6 months ago when Gerald mentioned his nephew might be joining the company. Smart kid, he said, just graduated from University of Texas. Business degree. I nodded, thinking nothing of it. Companies hired recent graduates all the time, started them in entry-level positions to learn from the ground up, but Tyler didn't start at the ground. He started in the office next to Gerald, operations specialist, salary I could only guess at. Gerald introduced him like visiting royalty. Tyler's going to observe our processes, Gerald announced, Learn how we do things. Tyler observed by sitting in on my client calls, taking notes while I explained vendor negotiations, asking questions showing he didn't understand the basics. He was eager, polite, said yes, sir, thank you, like his mother had raised him right. I trained him because that's what you do. You help the new guy, even when the new guy's last name is Patterson and his uncle signs your paychecks, even when you start to suspect where this is going. The moment I knew came 3 weeks ago during a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. I stayed late to finish quarterly reports. The office was empty except for the cleaning crew. I was heading to the break room for coffee when I heard voices from Gerald's office. His door was cracked, and sound carried better than people realized. The board's going to ask questions, Gerald said. Tyler's only been here 2 months. Another voice, deeper, older. Probably James Mitchell from corporate. You said Anthony was ready for promotion. Anthony's solid, but Tyler's family and he's got the degree. The board likes degrees. What about Anthony's experience? Gerald laughed. Not mean, not kind. Anthony's a good worker, reliable, but not executive. Material. He'll keep doing what he's doing, make good money, and everything works out. I stood in the hallway for 30 seconds listening to them plan my future. Tyler would get Henderson's position. I would train him, support him, and pretend to be grateful. Anthony won't cause problems, Gerald continued. He's got a daughter. Alimony payments. He needs this job. He'll fall in line. I walked away quietly so they wouldn't hear my footsteps, went back to my desk, saved my work, and drove home in complete silence. That night, I couldn't sleep, thinking about Gerald's words. He thought 5 years of loyalty and hard work had earned me the right to be grateful for scraps. I thought about Sophia, proud when I told her about the possible promotion. My dad's going to be a director, she'd told her friends. I would have to explain why that wasn't happening. I thought about my ex-wife, how she always said I was too passive. You let people walk over you, Anthony, she said during one of our last fights. Stand up for yourself for once. Maybe she'd been right. The next morning, I came to work with a different mindset. I watched Tyler more carefully, noticing how Gerald included him in executive meetings while keeping me focused on day-to-day operations. Other managers began deferring to Tyler on decisions that should have been mine. 3 weeks later, sitting in that conference room and watching Tyler accept congratulations for a job he hadn't earned, I felt something break inside me. Not anger, not sadness, just clarity. Gerald thought I needed this job. Thought I'd fall in line because I had bills to pay and a daughter to support. He was wrong. I opened my laptop and started typing my resignation letter. My hands were steady. My mind was clear. For once, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I submitted my resignation at exactly 4:30 p.m. on Friday. Gerald had just returned from walking Tyler around the warehouse, showing him his domain. I knocked on his door, handed him the envelope, and said, "This is my 2 weeks' notice." Gerald's face went through confusion, disbelief, then panic. He tore open the envelope and read quickly, eyes moving back and forth across the page. "Is this a joke?" he said. "No, sir. You can't be serious. You're leaving because Tyler got the promotion." I stayed quiet, letting him fill the silence. Gerald stood up, pacing. "Anthony, let's be reasonable here. You're upset, I get it, but walking away from 5 years of building your career, that's not smart. I've made my decision. What about your daughter? Your responsibilities." There it was, the leverage he thought he had, the reason I'd fall in line and keep quiet. "I'll manage," I said. Gerald's tone hardened. "You realize how this looks, right? Quitting because you didn't get promoted. It's unprofessional, childish." I nodded. "I can see how you'd think that. I won't give you a good reference. You understand, walking out like this, leaving us hanging." Something cold settled in my stomach. 5 years of perfect performance, and now I was throwing a tantrum. 5 years of staying late and working weekends, and now I was unprofessional. "That's your choice," I said. Gerald tried a different approach. "Look, Anthony, I like you. You're good at what you do, but Tyler brings something different to the table. Youth, fresh ideas, vision." "Vision," I repeated. "The board wants innovation, new thinking. Tyler represents the future of this company. And what do I represent?" Gerald paused. "Experience, stability, those are valuable, too. Valuable enough to train his replacement, but not valuable enough to promote. I understood the math. I appreciate the clarification. Don't do this, Anthony. Take the weekend, think it over. Come back Monday and we'll pretend this conversation never happened. He genuinely believed I would back down, that threatening my reference and questioning my professionalism would make me fold. I'll finish out my 2 weeks, I said. I'll train Tyler on anything he needs to know. Gerald's face darkened. You'll train him? You think Tyler needs training from someone who quits when things don't go his way? He's going to need to understand vendor contracts, supply chain logistics, emergency protocols. I kept my voice level. Unless you plan to figure that out yourself. That hit home. Gerald knew he didn't understand the technical side of operations. Neither did Tyler. They needed me at least for 2 more weeks. Fine, Gerald said. 2 weeks, but don't expect any favors. Don't expect me to help you land somewhere else. You're burning bridges, Anthony. I nodded and turned to leave. Anthony, Gerald called after me. You're making a mistake. A big one. I stopped at the door. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. I walked back to my desk, feeling lighter than I had in months. The office was mostly empty, people heading home for the weekend. Tyler was still at his desk, studying organizational charts like they contained the secrets of the universe. I sat down and opened my laptop, documenting everything Tyler would need to know. Vendor contact information, emergency procedures, troubleshooting guides, all organized logically and concisely. Not because Gerald asked me to, but because the people who depended on our supply chains deserved better than chaos. My phone buzzed. Text message from Sophia. Dad, can we get dinner tomorrow? I want to hear about your week. I smiled and typed back. Absolutely. I've got news to share. Good news for once. News about standing up for myself, about walking away from people who didn't value what I brought to the table. Gerald thought he was punishing me, threatening my reference to make me grateful for the chance to stay. He had no idea what he just set in motion. Monday morning brought revelations. I arrived early as usual and found Tyler at his desk, looking overwhelmed. He had spreadsheets open on 3 monitors, frantically taking notes from vendor emails. Morning, Tyler, I said. How's the transition going? He looked up, relief flooding his face. Anthony, thank God. I've been here since 6 trying to understand the Morrison Industries account. Their procurement manager is threatening to cancel our contract if we don't resolve a shipping issue by noon. Morrison Industries, our biggest client, ordered heavy machinery components worth $2 million annually. I'd managed their account personally for years. What's the issue? I asked. He couldn't figure which supplier handled the delayed titanium brackets. He was drowning. Tyler, I said carefully, did Gerald brief you on the Morrison account? He said you'd handle the transition, but mentioned your situation and thought he should figure it out himself, show initiative. My situation, that's what they were calling it now. I spent the next 3 hours walking Tyler through Morrison's relationship, explained just-in-time delivery requirements, backup supplier networks, and why a simple delay could cascade into contract cancellation. This is incredibly complex, Tyler said. How do you keep track of all these moving parts? Experience, I said, and good documentation. Could you show me your documentation system? That's when I realized Gerald hadn't just promoted Tyler without preparation, he had promoted him without understanding what the job actually required. Tyler wasn't incompetent, but he was unprepared for the scope of regional operations. I spent my lunch break making calls, reaching out to contacts I had built over the years. Word travels fast in industrial logistics, and people were already hearing about changes at Ravens Park, some more concerned about continuity, others curious about new opportunities. Anthony, said Janet Morrison, the procurement manager who'd threatened to cancel earlier, I heard rumors about management changes. Please tell me you're still handling our account for the next 2 weeks. I said, after that, Tyler Patterson will be your primary contact. Silence on the line. Patterson, as in Gerald Patterson, his nephew. Jesus, Anthony, that kid called me this morning asking questions that made no sense. I thought he was new to the team, not replacing you. He's eager to learn, I said. I don't have time to train Ravens Park's management. We've got production schedules to meet. If your company can't provide competent service, we'll find someone who can. That conversation repeated itself for times with four major clients. By the end of the day, I had a clear picture of what would happen after I left. Tyler would struggle. Clients would get frustrated. Gerald would panic and try to micromanage operations he didn't understand. The whole regional division would start losing clients within 6 months, but that wasn't my problem anymore. Tuesday morning, Gerald called me into his office. He looked tired, stressed. "Anthony, I've been thinking about our conversation Friday. Maybe we were hasty. Maybe there's room for both you and Tyler in management. Meaning, you could be associate director, Tyler second in command. You'd handle the technical side. He'd focus on strategic planning. Associate director, a made-up title that meant doing the same job for the same pay while pretending Tyler was my boss. That's generous," I said, "but I'll stick with my original decision." Gerald's face hardened. "You're going to regret this, Anthony. I promise you that." Maybe, but I was done living in fear of Gerald's promises. By Wednesday, I had 3 job interviews scheduled, part of a plan that went beyond simply leaving Ravens Park. I'd spent 5 years building relationships in the Southwest industrial supply chain. Those relationships were mine, not the company's. My first interview was Thursday morning with Silverlinks Energy, a renewable energy equipment distributor in Austin. Their regional manager, David Harrison, had been trying to recruit me for 2 years. "Anthony," David said as we shook hands, "I heard through the grapevine you might be available." Word travels fast when good people become available, especially people with your client relationships. David offered me a position as Regional Operations Director, the exact title Gerald had given to Tyler. The salary was 30% higher, the benefits were better, and most importantly, they wanted me to bring my client network. "We've been trying to break into the heavy machinery component market," David explained. "Your relationships with Morrison Industries, Copperfield Manufacturing, and Border States Equipment would be invaluable." It was ethical, standard industry practice. Clients follow account managers they trust, especially in a relationship-based business like industrial supply. I hadn't signed a non-compete, and the clients I'd served were free to choose their suppliers. "I'd need to give Ravens Park 2 weeks' notice," I said. "Of course," David replied. "Professional courtesy, though I suspect it might release you early once they understand the situation." Friday afternoon, Gerald called me into his office again. Tyler sat in the corner, looking miserable. Apparently, word of my Thursday interview had reached them. "I hear you're interviewing with competitors," Gerald said. "I'm exploring opportunities while still employed, while training Tyler. That's a conflict of interest." I stayed quiet. "It's also corporate espionage," Gerald continued. "Sharing proprietary information with competitors." "I haven't shared any proprietary information." "Your client relationships are proprietary. My client relationships are personal. I built them over 5 years of professional service." Gerald's face turned red. "Now those clients belong to Ravens Park Ventures. You take them with you and we'll see you for everything you're worth." Tyler spoke up from the corner. "Uncle Gerald, maybe we should shut up," Tyler said. Gerald didn't take his eyes off me. "Anthony, you walk out that door and try to steal our clients. I'll make sure you never work in this industry again." I stood up slowly. "Gerald," I said, "I've given you 5 years of my life, perfect performance, reviews, 60-hour weeks. I trained your nephew to take the job you promised me. I've been nothing but professional, and now you're threatening me. I'm finishing my 2 weeks' notice and moving on to a better opportunity. What happens after that depends on how you handle the transition." Gerald leaned back in his chair. "We'll see about that." I walked to the door then turned back. "Tyler, if you need help over the next week, just ask, despite what your uncle thinks. I want you to succeed." Tyler nodded gratefully. Gerald glared. I spent my last week at Ravens Park documenting everything Tyler would need to know. I created step-by-step guides, compiled client histories, clarified vendor contracts, and laid out troubleshooting procedures. Not for Gerald, not for Tyler, but for the teams who depended on our operations. When Friday arrived, I packed my belongings, left the office for the last time, and walked to my car with a sense of relief I hadn't felt in years. Driving home, I thought about Sophia, about building a life where my value wasn't ignored, where I could stand proud of my work without having to train someone else to take what should have been mine. Monday, I started at Silverlinks Energy as Regional Operations Director. My salary was higher, my responsibilities meaningful, and my client relationships respected. For the first time in years, I felt in control, in charge, and finally recognized. For the work I had earned, Gerald's threats faded into background noise. I had moved on, stronger, wiser, and free. The lessons of loyalty, patience, and self-respect had cost me 5 years, but they had also taught me how to stand up, how to walk away with dignity, and how to take my life back. Tyler would learn eventually, or he wouldn't. That was no longer my concern. I had my own future to shape, and for the first time in a long time, it felt bright, secure, and truly mine.